This summer, Russia is planning to launch a large-scale offensive in the eastern part of Donetsk region, which it has been trying to capture since the beginning of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. This was reported today, citing Ukrainian military officials and analysts. And it warns that Russia is now gathering a large force in order to try to quickly capture Pokrovsk and Konstantinovka. But that's not all. Today he announced that the Russians have advanced in 3 regions of Ukraine, including Donetsk. The other 2 are Kharkiv and Sumy. Unfortunately, there is some progress, and we will also talk about this in this episode. And today Zelensky responded to all this, announcing an increase in weapons production in response to Russia's strikes. The key elements are strike drones, interceptors, cruise missiles, and Ukrainian ballistic missiles. And Zelensky stated that there will be a symmetrical response to all of Russia's actions. Hello, my name is Alexei Pechi. Today is the 27th of May on the calendar. Let's go through everything in order, but before we start, I ask you to subscribe to this channel, leave a like, and write a comment under this episode. In addition, subscribe to my Telegram channel, Peachy News. The link to it is in the description of this video. There we publish breaking news as soon as it comes in. So, today it is being reported that warnings about a large-scale offensive from the Russian Federation appeared at the moment when the peace process, mediated by the United States, was not bringing concrete results. Moscow has rejected calls from Washington and Europe for an immediate ceasefire and is therefore now preparing to launch a large-scale offensive on the eastern part of Donetsk region. American analysts said that the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin seems to be confident in his victory. Nevertheless, they emphasized that sanctions and heavy losses are significantly slowing down the Russian war machine. That is why the summer offensive may become his last chance to achieve success on the front. They added that, in addition to Donetsk region, Russian occupiers are planning to carry out smaller attacks along the Sumy and Kharkiv regions. According to analysts, the Kremlin's plan is to put more pressure on Ukraine's defense forces. In addition, there is a statement that the Russians will concentrate their forces in the direction of Pokrovsk and Konstantinovka. And experts remind us that for almost a year now, the occupiers have been unsuccessfully trying to capture these cities. In addition, Konstantinovka is not yet on the verge of complete occupation, but defending this city will become a very difficult task for the Ukrainian military, since the Russians can attack it from 3 different directions. Overall, right now, Ukrainian soldiers are confident that the Russians may focus on the Donetsk region, and everything else will be a distraction and a way to disperse Ukrainian resources and attention. But what is meant is that transferring part of the forces to the Sumy or Kharkiv regions will not give the Russians the piece of territory they are counting on. Nevertheless, Ukraine's defense forces will be forced to divert their attention there as well. It was recalled that the Kremlin needed 80,000 soldiers to capture Avdiivka in February 2024 after a grueling siege. According to Ukrainian military intelligence, there are currently 125,000 Russian troops stationed on the border of Sumy and Kharkiv regions, which is not enough to capture 2 regional centers. A representative of Ukrainian military intelligence, Andriy Chernyak, said that these troops will most likely be used to capture sections of Ukrainian land along the border. And this coincides with Putin's plan to create a buffer zone. And let me remind you that earlier, the Washington Post had already written, citing American and European officials, that the summer offensive would be Russia's last chance to achieve success on the battlefield. And experts note that the time to put pressure on Moscow may now be more advantageous than ever since the first days of the full-scale invasion. And today the project reports that the occupiers have intensified assault operations in the north and east of Ukraine. Russian soldiers continue to put pressure on the positions of the armed forces of Ukraine along the entire front line. But today, analysts from Deep State reported on the advance of Russian troops in the Kharkiv, Sumy and Donetsk regions. It is noted that the occupiers had success near the village of Belovody. This is in the Sumy region, Kamenka. This is the Dvorichansk community of the Kharkiv region and the settlement of Kotlerovka in the Donetsk region. All these settlements are located near the border, and Kotlerovka is close to the administrative border with the Dnipropetrovsk region. Well, and earlier, it was previously reported that the Russians in the Sumy region captured Novenkoy, Zhuravka, Basovka and Veselo. This information was also confirmed by the Sumy Regional Military Administration. The village of Belovody also ended up in the gray zone. Well, according to the information, Russia is trying to create a buffer zone in the Sudskaya region and to carry out a semi-encirclement of the regional center. The Chief of Staff of the 13th Brigade of Karty of the Operational Assignment of the National Guard of Ukraine noted that the Russian Federation is preparing for active assaults in the Kharkiv direction and is therefore amassing manpower near the Ukrainian border. Well, today the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky responded to the enemy's plans. After a meeting with the military, he stated that Ukraine must increase its own weapons production. New agreements are being prepared with partners in Europe for investments specifically in Ukrainian production. Next, I will quote Zelensky. Commander Zelenskyy, the head of the General Staff, Hanatov, and the Minister of Defense, Umarov, were also present. The issue of planning our actions, our readiness to respond to Russian strikes, to their threats, as well as to act preventively. And this means increasing our production, our drones, and our missiles. Already, hundreds of Ukrainian companies are delivering results for the defense forces of Ukraine. There will be more, I am sure of it. Now we are maximizing the involvement of entrepreneurial power in weapons production. We are already preparing new agreements with our partners in Europe for investments specifically in Ukrainian production in the near future. And above all, the production of unmanned and long-range components. Everything that allows us to control the situation at the front, to save the lives of our soldiers, and to act at a significant distance. Well, moving on. Zelensky added that it is not possible to publicly discuss existing plans and our capabilities, but, quote, the perspective is clear to respond in kind to all Russian threats and challenges. They, over there in Russia, must clearly feel the consequences of what they are doing against Ukraine. These will be strike drones, interceptors, cruise missiles, Ukrainian ballistic missiles. These are the key elements. We must produce everything ourselves. And regarding whether we can really produce weapons, and about the specific agreements with the Europeans, Zelensky says, here I'll lift the veil of secrecy a little bit. The thing is, today there was actually some very important news, which I wrote about today on my Telegram channel. Well, let me quote it for you here. The European Union has supported the creation of a defense fund of $150 billion, which is very important. With the participation of Ukraine, the European Union Council has officially approved the creation of a new defense instrument designed to finance large-scale investments in the European defense industry. The fund will strengthen production capacities and ensure the availability of weapons in times of crisis. For Ukraine, it is important here that our country is being involved in the initiative from the very beginning. That means Ukrainian defense enterprises will have access to the program on equal terms with the European Union countries. Ukrainian companies will be able to participate in joint procurement and supply of products. This is exactly what I have already talked about several times. The European Union, from this budget of $150 billion, will place orders with enterprises of Ukraine's defense industry. Our enterprises will produce weapons, and then, according to the so-called circular scheme, most of these weapons will be transferred to the defense forces of Ukraine. If it's still unclear, I'll explain it a bit more simply. European enterprises can't keep up with all the needs of Ukraine and Europe, but they have money. Ukrainian enterprises can produce more, but they don't have money. So Europeans have it, we don't. It's a mirror situation. What's the way out of this? Europe is not giving physical weapons to Ukraine, but Europe is providing money with which our Ukrainian defense industry produces these weapons for itself. But it's as if the Europeans are the ones giving it to us. You see, for this, all the Europeans are even ready to launch joint production, meaning we provide the facilities, they provide the so-called blueprints, and of course the money. In the future, these joint enterprises in Ukraine will be able to serve the European arms market. As they say, it's a win-win situation. That's why the Russians are, of course, preparing an offensive here, but Ukraine and Europe are also preparing to respond, and most importantly, they have the means to respond. So for now, I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments under this episode, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to give a like.